I saw a video of a comedy celebration of the Bill of Rights. That's entirely appropriate because without, at the very least, the seminal First Amendment, those bold comedians would not have a voice or a livelihood. They'd probably be in prison. That document is their backbone, their privilege, their pass. So they had every good reason for holding a party in its honor. And while I was listening to them crack wise about the Bill of Rights, it occurred to me that I didn't know very much about it. So I did a little noodling. When the United States of America first came into existence, it was operating under a document, a driver's manual, known as the Articles of Confederation. There was a general sense of dissatisfaction with this, the main objection being that it did not provide enough specifics for a strong central government. In this debate, there were those known as the Federalists, favoring a stronger centralized government, and the Anti-Federalists, strongly opposing that. Following much discussion, a new document was created which became known as the United States Constitution. It was ratified by enough states, 3/4, to make it official and binding in 1787. But there were many people who did not approve of it either. The state of Rhode Island was so opposed to it that it refused to send a delegate to the convention. Once it became official, however, it was clear to many people that it had swung too far in granting power to the federal government, and a call went out for a major adjustment, for amendments that would grant certain powers and freedoms to individuals and not to the state. James Madison opposed this, I think because he was against creating a register of specific freedoms. If the only freedoms granted to a person were the ones written down, who would decide which ones to include and how long would the list have to be? It would obviously be too long and inevitably self-contradictory. He was eventually convinced that, in spite of his reasonable objections, the Constitution needed a correction. So he drew up a list of 30-some proposals for consideration, based largely on the state of Virginia's charter and other documents going back to the Magna Carta. The representatives whittled that down, the senators further compressed it, the combined Congress approved it, and a final vote of the 14 states, Vermont having been added, was taken on 13 items. In 1791, 10 of them passed and became the first amendments to the Constitution, now popularly known as the Bill of Rights. You must have at least a passing familiarity with them. The First Amendment with its freedoms of speech, the press, and religion, along with the right to assemble. The Second Amendment with the right to bear arms. The Third, against having to harbor soldiers. And the others which afford us individuals some measure of protection against a too aggressive legal system, as well as against an authoritarian political apparatus. You get a sense, in looking at those 10 amendments, that those men who had so recently paid so dearly for their freedom from one master, England, were in no haste to enter into a fealty with another, even one of their own making. Not so fast, the 10 amendments say. We are a nation in good standing on this planet, but we are a nation of free individual people, and we intend to keep it that way. As you can easily imagine, that is a fine line and a delicate balance. These rights were not really visited in a penetrating legal way until into the 20th century. Perhaps the exigencies of survival were more of a concern up until then, but at some point prosperity kicked in, the options in living multiplied, and suddenly it was important to examine whether a person had a right to do this or that, and maybe even more important, to insist that a person was exempt from others' attempts to infringe on their constitutionally guaranteed rights. Certainly, technology has created a new world with fresh legal challenges, wholly unanticipated in 1791. The balance now, as at the inception, is between the individual and the state. Hopefully both can prosper, but if it comes to a struggle, the 10 Amendments are there to defend the tiny individual against the massive state. Unfortunately, or perhaps I should say purely as a practical matter, in times of crisis, the Bill of Rights tends to recede until the safety of the state can be confirmed. Until that time, the high concern with individual rights may have to be suspended or even ignored. Madison wanted those first approved measures to be incorporated into the body of the Constitution, but instead they were attached, like frosting to a cake. So the Bill of Rights is something of a luxury, still an add-on, not the very core, something we can enjoy when times are fair, but can be set aside like perfume or brandy when survival is once again at issue. So I would say to the comedians celebrating the Bill of Rights, laugh while you can. Whoop it up. There may come a day when it won't seem so funny, when your precious opinion is held to be not a lampoon, not a comedic insight, but sedition, treason,